Smartsheet versus Airtable. This is a question we've gotten from a number of our viewers, and despite the two applications looking and feeling similar with a grid-based view, the applications are actually pretty different. I think they're geared towards different audiences and solve a different set of problems. And that's what we're going to get into in this video to find out which of these applications is a better fit for you and your business. Hi, I'm Dan Lehman from AutomationHelpers.com, and we help companies like yours get automated with portals, apps, and integrations. Smartsheet is essentially a project management tool built on top of spreadsheets. And who doesn't love spreadsheets? I'm sure almost all of you use them in your business, and so you get additional collaborative functionality on top of spreadsheets with some really good project management baked in. Airtable used to be a little bit more of a work management platform. There's different views and different ways of presenting your data, but really now they're focused on building internal applications for users, and they do this through something called Airtable interfaces. So while yes, you can do project management in Airtable, it's not quite as opinionated as other platforms and not really designed just for project management. If you're thinking of using Airtable, you're probably using it for multiple different purposes. You might use it for your company onboarding, and then you've built a CRM on top of it, and you do inventory management and order management. So as we go through this video, you'll probably find yourself leaning towards one direction or the other. Either you're really comfortable with spreadsheets and you want to be able to do project management on top of those spreadsheets, in which case Smartsheet's going to be a really good fit, or you want a full-fledged database. It might not be quite as opinionated, but you get that ability to create your own applications, and it's very flexible based on your workflow. So let's talk about pricing. In Smartsheet, there's a free plan, there's a couple of paid plans, and then we have an enterprise offering as well. Airtable is going to be the exact same in that regard. And both of these platforms are really geared towards the enterprise. Airtable in the past seemed really focused on SMB, but in the past year or so, they've really changed their focus to focus on enterprise customers. Smartsheet has been focused on enterprise customers for quite a while. But that's not to say you can't be a small business and utilize these applications as well. So talking about Smartsheet here, you can see that there's this free plan. What they do in Smartsheet is they're really restricting the amount of activity you can do because they're only allowing you to have 2 sheets as you're trying out the free plan. In my mind, that's much more equivalent to a trial because I don't know who'd be content with only 2 sheets. Airtable's free plan instead focuses more on your limitations of the number of records, the equivalent of the number of rows in Smartsheet that you can have. But in terms of the pages, which would be most equivalent to tables in Airtable, you can have unlimited tables and you can have unlimited bases. So if you have a small amount of data, you can actually do quite a bit on the free plan. The reason I'd say most people upgrade from a free plan to paid plans on Airtable is because of limitations around the number of records or the amount of storage that they have access to. In general, Airtable has a more generous free plan that you can use to get started, but both of these applications are certainly focused on their paid tiers of users. Here in Smartsheet, you can see that it's a really affordable entry point per user per month. Both of them are structured on per user per month licensing fees, and so it's the same setup that way, but this is $7 per user per month, and the business plan is $25 per user per month. Contrast that with Airtable's $20 per seat per month on their team plan or $45 per seat per month on their business plan, and it's almost double the price that you're paying compared to Smartsheet. As a general rule, Airtable is really focused on restricting the amount of data that you can have in the system, where it seems like in Smartsheet there are more features that are being restricted, especially between the Pro and Business plan. So in general, you can see that there's a lot of similarities between the team and business features. That's not to say there's no differences, but it seems that most of the features that are different between the two plans are going to be really those higher level features that are more important to enterprises, things like two-way sync instead of one-way syncing. One huge advantage for Smartsheet when it comes to pricing is when you're on the business plan and you're paying that $25 per user per month of people who are actually creating the sheets, you can have unlimited free editors, people who are editing along with you at the same time. And while Airtable has some options around free read-only users, if you're going to be editing the actual data, you're making updates to the data, you're going to be paying for that person as a user. So what are the big takeaways here? In general, for Smartsheet, there's going to be that lower entry point. You can pay $7 a user a month to get people in there and using the application. But you're going to find that Airtable is typically more generous with the features included in their lower priced plans. However, Airtable plans are about double the cost of Smartsheet plans. So there's a lot to think about as you're going through here. But the real doozy in all of this is that Smartsheet has a ton of additional functionality, but it's locked behind an additional paid upgrade package called Smartsheet Advance. With Airtable, yes, the per user licenses are going to be significantly higher in cost, but what you see is what you get. There aren't going to be these constant additional charges, with some exceptions like their new AI features that they introduced. And Smartsheet Advance is not a small additional upsell. It's pretty significant. It's not really my place to get into the pricing details because they go through the enterprise sales process where you have to talk to a sales rep who walks you through it. But in general, at least as an SMB, they're going to charge a multiplier several times higher than the actual license cost itself. So it's not a core package and a little add-on. It's a core package and a big add-on if you want this additional functionality. Now we're going to talk through some of the features that you'll get as part of the advanced platform. Not going to be entirely comprehensive. You'll want to go through the sales process yourself to figure that out, but just keep in mind those additional costs. For some companies, if you're an enterprise customer already, you're not really concerned about the budget of the per user license cost. You just really care about the security and the functionality and the permissions. If that's the case, I think you'll get a lot of value out of what Smartsheet Advance has to offer. So first up, we have the Control Center. And the Control Center helps with some things like being able to have a higher level portfolio management view of all the projects that you have. Now, some of that functionality is actually easier to do in Airtable out of the box because you're constructing the tables and the relationships how you want. So being able to have a portfolio view is something that you can construct yourself in Airtable, not directly out of the box, but you can do it. But there are advanced features as well, such as being able to automatically provision new projects. And in Airtable, you don't really get this centralized kind of hub ability to take bases that you have and then provision new ones and kind of have master versions of it that you have. So there is additional functionality here, but some of it can be done with Airtable with a little bit of elbow grease. Next up, we have the Data Shuttle. Now, some of this is similar to Airtable's synced tables, which allow you to pull data in from other data sources. But one thing that's cool about this is you're essentially setting a scheduled job on the data, both for uploading grid data and offloading grid data as well. So if you want to do something like take backups of this and you want to get a spreadsheet that you can hold on to, this is something that you could do with Data Shuttle, which you can't really do natively with Airtable. Yes, there are many different ways to solve that problem. There's third-party add-ons you could do with Make or Zapier, but this Data Shuttle having all that access in one feature is really helpful. Granular sharing control with dynamic view. Again, there's some features here that are going to be helpful and unique to Smartsheet and some that are going to be kind of redundant and you could do in Airtable. Mostly this is around permissions and being able to say who has access to what, who can see what, to be able to have their configured view and make sure that people only are seeing what they need to see. Now, this is something that you can do with dynamic view. Now, in Airtable, you can do some of this as well with more granular permissions that we have inside of interfaces. I wouldn't consider Airtable particularly strong at granular permissions, but there's much more functionality than there used to be, especially now that you can do this more in interfaces rather than just the grid views themselves. There's an app for pivot tables, which you can do pivot tables out of the box in Airtable, now with a new feature inside of its interfaces. Now, for data mesh, there are some advanced features, but by and large, this is the solution for Smartsheet users to be able to connect data together from different sheets. In Airtable, this would be done simply between linking records between two tables, and it's just a simple out-of-the-box feature available on all plans. Even when you're connecting this data with data mesh, it still doesn't really turn it into a full-fledged database. So again, if you want your data, if it's not just about projects and tasks and spreadsheet financial data, if you want to actually have applications that interact with your contacts and accounts and products and product line items, and all of that information that actually intersects with each other, that's going to be a better fit for Airtable. Now, when it comes to the number of records or the number of rows in each of these applications, you can see in business here on Airtable that we get 125,000 records per base. Again, a base is going to be a full database. It's going to be the wrapper around multiple tables, whereas inside of Smartsheet, we would just have the sheets themselves. So we can't directly compare the number of records per base to the number of rows in a sheet, but in Smartsheet, you get 20,000 rows that you have in a sheet, and we get 125,000 records that we have in a base in Airtable. So you'll kind of have to compare this for yourself. You know, if you have one table of 100,000 objects, well, that's consuming the majority of what you'd have here, but that would never be possible in Smartsheet natively since you've got that limitation of 20,000 rows. But this is where data table in Smartsheet becomes incredibly useful because with data table, you can have millions of rows of data. And then you use that alongside other tools like Data Shuttle to manage how that data is coming in from outside data sources. And then you take a subset of that data to actually interact with it on a normal basis. So maybe you have all these transaction records that are stored in data table, and then you want to be able to take a subset of that for the current month or something like that and be able to interact with that data. So I think it's pretty cool that Smartsheet is solving this larger data set issue with the use of data tables. Next, let's go ahead and dive into the applications themselves. So I'm in Smartsheet, and both of these applications, I really appreciate their simplicity and cleanliness of design. They both feel very modern to be able to work with. Here inside of Smartsheet, we've got this really nice simplified navigation on the side. So right here, I'm on my home screen, and I can see recent things that I've been working on. I've got a notifications panel over here. We can browse what I'm working on in more of a list type view. And one of the things that I think is really powerful about Smartsheet is when I'm creating, honestly, most of the time I can start with a really good template that's out there. And notice that there's all of these different solutions available to me, all these different templates, and these are just for marketing. And look how many different categories that we have to choose from. So what's nice is that Smartsheet themselves has really invested in making this easy. And they even tell you up front the complexity of each of these. So maybe if I want to click into marketing campaign management, I can get a preview of what this is going to look like so that I can see, I can actually picture myself and my data in the different dashboards and reports and the different sheets that I have and be able to get an idea of that before I actually create it myself. Now, Airtable has what they call Airtable Universe, and it has many templates as well. But to be honest, most of them are really outdated, and they don't even fully take advantage of the application that Airtable's been building. There's been this huge addition with interfaces, and most of the templates don't even involve interfaces. Now, there are new templates that Airtable's coming out with, especially as it pertains to their interfaces, but they haven't made nearly the same investment that Smartsheet has. When you're working inside of Smartsheet, you can create new sheets, which is going to be kind of the base level object, an individual spreadsheet that you have. You've got reports, which help us aggregate these together. And then we also have dashboards as well, where we can provide that presentation layer. What I really like about Smartsheet is how intuitive the interface is, especially as it comes to just working in a spreadsheet. So here I could set a reminder for myself, or add an attachment, or add a comment, all without having to really have extra steps with this. And really basic project management things like managing subtasks. If I create a new task here, I'm going to right click so you can see this, but I've just got commands where I can indent and outdent this. So if I indent this, boom, it's now a subtask. It can be collapsed into what I'm already working on. It's that simple. There's a lot of project management pieces that just feel more intuitive inside of Smartsheet, especially if you're used to using spreadsheets or something like Microsoft Project. Now, when it comes to different views, I can choose the selector up at the top. We are displaying this as a grid by default. There's a new timeline view that's available where you can view the information on that timeline. There's a Gantt chart. And again, this is going to still feel spreadsheety or like a grid, but we also have this additional context. Let me just change this here, make that a little bit smaller, where we can actually see those dependencies over on the right-hand side. There's a card view, which I think is a little bit more like a Kanban than what I would call a card, but basically the same thing, and a calendar view. We're able to easily add new columns. I can just click up here and say, let's insert a column to the right. You can see we have a number of different column types, and this is going to feel pretty similar to when you're inside of Airtable in terms of the different selections that you have. But Airtable has some additional options around computed columns. And the reason for this is because you're always linking records to each other from different tables. So you've got accounts and linking them to your contacts. So because of that, we can use rollups and lookups in Airtable, and we can't really do the same kind of functionality here inside of Smartsheet. But because this is ultimately a spreadsheet inside of Smartsheet, unlike Airtable, then you're allowed to do things with formulas that you can't do in Airtable. Like if I just want to sum my values here, and I can sum, and I can put that in, and let's select these two values that I want to sum. This is going to be just like I would do in Excel or Google Sheets. In Airtable, we can display summaries at the bottom, but I can't reuse that information. I can't refer to that cell because ultimately this isn't a spreadsheet. Despite it displaying as a grid, we don't have the flexibility of a spreadsheet because our data is more structured inside of Airtable. But with structured data comes its own set of advantages as well. Like I was talking about before, we can actually have links between the different records, between two different tables. So here I'm on tasks and I'm linking to my project, and I can click and open up that project and see attributes about it. If we're using the API, we can pull that information back. From the project itself, we could have a lookup. I think I have a lookup somewhere on here. I think from the photo, I've got my assignee and I want a picture of the person here. We've got that information. So there's a lot that we can do with both of these applications. But again, Smartsheet is going to be the advantages of using a spreadsheet, and Airtable is going to be the advantages of a database and structuring that data with different relationships between it. Now, in terms of the views, our selection is pretty similar here. We've got our grid by default. We've got a calendar. A gallery here is going to be a little bit more visual. Let me just open this up. So here we could customize the card, and let's pick an image field here. And you can see we've got this really nice visual appearance for displaying these cards. Kanban is going to be similar to the cards inside a Smartsheet. Timeline we have inside a Smartsheet. Gantt is available. Both of them you can create forms. The list view here is unique to Airtable and is relatively new. It's something a little bit more akin to Notion. So here's an example of a project list view where I can have information about the accounts and then nested information about my projects. Again, all of this is still editable. And then underneath that, I've got my tasks. So if you want to be able to look at different tables or sheets worth of information and kind of this nested view, I really enjoy this list view. And we see this all the time in different interfaces. Forms in both Airtable and Smartsheet function relatively similarly. It's got some nice functionality like the ability to have some conditional logic in terms of which fields are appearing. But for both of these form builders, be it Airtable or Smartsheet, I wouldn't really consider either of them super sophisticated in terms of what you can do with the logic behind them. For that, a lot of the times we're using a tool like Fillout, which pairs really well with Airtable, to be able to handle some more advanced logic use cases. Next, let's go ahead and talk about automations. So in Smartsheet, I can click at the top of my sheet up here for automation, and I've got options to either create a workflow from a template or create one from scratch. Now, if we check out these templates, we can see that there's some options up here in terms of notifications and moving data between these things. And there's a handful of different templates. There's a couple of integrated ones like sending a notification to Slack and things like generating some documents. If we go back and create one from scratch just to see our options here, we've got our triggers, and this is going to be similar to any kind of automation application like Zapier or whatnot. And for our triggers, we can see that we only have a handful of options here for these triggers. When a date is reached, when rows are added or changed, we can click on that, and we can add some additional logic here to be able to say when a certain field changes. But overall, this is not quite as many trigger options as we have available inside of Airtable. Likewise, there's a number of actions, but still not nearly as many as we have inside of Airtable. So we have things like alerting individual people, and we've got some of these integrated use cases with Microsoft Teams and Slack. One I like is that there's just one to be able to generate a document. That's a really nice feature, as well as being able to have approval requests. And while you can kind of hack your way around this inside of Airtable, this is something a little bit more unique to Smartsheet in being able to actually have an approval flow that's baked into the application. So this ability is really helpful. And then, of course, we've got common things that would happen in sheets or in tables, being able to change values and update them and clear them. And then we also have a security one, which is also a little bit more unique to Smartsheet, which is to say we want to lock certain rows when something happens. And so that, again, is a little bit more unique compared to what we have inside of Airtable. But in Airtable, I'd say the automations are simply much more robust. If we take a look here, we've got our triggers. We can add these. Notice that there's several more options that you can choose from, both within the application itself here. So we can do when a new form is submitted, or we could run something on a cron job here, or we could have it be incoming from another system when we receive a webhook, or when we click a button inside one of our interfaces. So you have several additional options when it comes to triggering our automations inside of Airtable. You can see that we also have a handful of different integrations that we could say, hey, when I've got something like Google Calendar and an event is created, let's trigger this process as well. Now, we don't have tons of integrated triggers here. You're still going to want to use an outside iPaaS or automation platform to be able to handle more of your complex integrated use cases, but it's nice that some of the common ones are available here. Automations inside of Airtable are scoped at the base level, which means we can choose from the different tables, the equivalent of sheets here, to be able to trigger our automations or to be able to interact with that data. And then when it comes to our actions, we've got several additional options when it comes to more advanced logic, things that you would almost program if you were a programmer, things like conditional logic or repeating. So if you have a list of objects and you want to repeat the automation for every step, that's a good use for that. And then we've got several actions inside of Airtable natively, things like sending an email, creating and updating records. This find records is really powerful inside of Airtable, and we're using it in almost all of our automations. So if you have something that triggers at the parent account and then you want to find all the children tasks or contact records, you can use that find records step and then pair that with things like the repeating group to be able to interact with all of those different objects. You can even do things like run a script. So if you want to do some more advanced logic and run essentially a little JavaScript in there, you can do that. And then unlike the triggers, there are several more integrations that you can do, integrated processes that work directly in this automation flow. So in Smartsheet, they more have a dedicated action for Slack and then the one for Teams. But here you can see there's just a bunch of different integrated actions that you can take. And some of these platforms have additional actions, not just a single action. The other thing I want to touch on here is Airtable's interfaces versus the dashboards and the reports that we have inside of Smartsheet. So in Smartsheet, we have this construct of a report. This is noted here with this orange icon that we have. And what's really unique about these reports is that we can have data coming from multiple different sheets that we're essentially aggregating. And we can add our own set of criteria, different filtering and grouping. But we could say, hey, here's a bunch of different, let's say, projects that we're on. And we want to pull up these projects into a single view. And we can easily do that by checking on multiple similar spreadsheets to be able to view that data in one place. Now, in Airtable, with best practices with database design, we're not constantly copying tables all the time to have multiple copies of this. So in Smartsheet, if you have projects, you're probably going to be creating the same project spreadsheet over and over again. And so this is a way to be able to unify that data together. Whereas in databases for Airtable, typically the data is already unified at the table level, and then you're summarizing it. So this is kind of an interesting construct that I could see being helpful for users of Airtable, but is also not quite as necessary because of just how we structure our database tables. And then in Smartsheet, this green icon is going to be for our different kinds of dashboards. And dashboards can contain the data and summary level things. We can have different charts on here, information with metrics, and we can have different shortcuts to our sheets themselves. This functionality here is going to be most akin to Airtable interfaces, but is still a little bit different. We don't have quite as much power here inside of our dashboards. Interfaces at a high level are really just kind of custom applications that we're building inside of the tool. And we can do things like group together different views that we have, and we can do dashboardy kinds of things like displaying metrics. And we can drill into data, or we could have processes and different information and walk through different steps. So there's a number of different things that you can envision with Airtable interfaces, whereas dashboards in Smartsheet are always just about information. They're less about the actual actions that you're taking and more about displaying the information. Interfaces here are more powerful because we can actually take action on a lot of the data that we're doing. So Airtable interfaces, here's an example for project management. I want to see information about tasks at a summary level. Here I've got a list view incorporated. Here I've got some information in a timeline. Let's look at information about our projects and tasks here, and we can sort this in different ways. We've got our schedule, and you can see it's just a nice way of grouping this information together. Now here under management, we've got an example of something that feels more dashboardy here, and we're talking about utilization, and then we can take a look at our team as well. So that was an example that still might kind of feel like a dashboard to you, but here's a different example that we built, and this one was an invoice generator. And so we can say, hey, we're creating an invoice for this account. We want to add different line items on here that we have to sell to our customer. So let's put in some data here. That's going to map it across, make calculations for us. We can generate PDFs off of this. Okay, so based on the information that you've seen, let's figure out which is the best platform for you. If you're a small business and you need a low cost of entry, the barrier to entry in terms of budget is going to be much more affordable for you with Smartsheet. Also, if you feel in your bones that you are really attached to spreadsheets and you just want some more collaboration features and visualizations when it comes to spreadsheets and how you're interacting with your projects, then again, I think Smartsheet's going to be a great fit. Now, if you're an enterprise PMO focused on traditional project management and budget's not the main concern, then all of the functionality that Smartsheet Advance has to offer can be really powerful. So if any of those sound like you, you might find that Smartsheet is going to be a better fit. Airtable, on the other hand, is going to cost more per user licensing, but you're not going to feel like you're constantly being upsold on all of these different packages. So if you want to know the price that you're paying, yeah, it's going to cost some more, but there's not all of these additional packages you need to add on. I think Airtable is going to be a better fit. Airtable's automations are insanely powerful. If you want to harness that power and automation in everything that you're doing, you really can't go wrong with Airtable. And finally, if you're looking to get beyond spreadsheets and project management, and you want to combine your project management and your CRM and your inventory management and your order management, all of that functionality is perfect for how you can design applications, your own internal applications inside of Airtable. I hope this video has been helpful for you to see the advantages of each of these applications between Smartsheet and Airtable. If you have any questions or you need help on your next automation build, don't hesitate to reach out to our website at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering free 30-minute consultations.